All right, I don't know if this is an intentionally interesting segue, but we go from programming E. coli bacteria to talking about food and food rescue. Ashley Stanley is a native Bostonian. She founded Lovin Spoonfuls just 4 years ago in 2010. They pick up fresh food that would otherwise be thrown away from grocery stores, farms, farmers markets, produce wholesalers, and they distribute it to community nonprofits that feed Boston's hungry. So far, Ashley and her team have distributed over 1.5 million pounds of fresh, healthy food to people who need it. Her nonprofit, Lovin Spoonfuls, is a two-time winner of the Mass Challenge competition, which is the biggest global startup accelerator program and is based here in Boston. The Globe recently named her a game changer, and she was also included in Boston Magazine's Power of Ideas issue. Ashley sits on Boston's Food Policy Task Force, and she's been named one of Oxfam International's Sisters of the Planet ambassadors, honored for her commitment to social justice through hunger relief. Hunger, Ashley says, is the most preventable problem that we've got in this country. Please welcome Ashley Stanley.
Good morning. I have yet to turn this on because I will be standing here for a second, so I don't want any wild sound issues. Okay, if I get this right, which I probably won't. So I will skip it for the moment. My name's Ashley Stanley. I am the founder and executive director of Lovin Spoonfuls, an almost 5-year-old nonprofit right here in Boston, and we do food rescue. And there are some conferences like this where somebody will speak before you, and let me just say that is an incredibly tough act to follow. It is the kind of speaker that makes you feel smarter than you ever could be. Following that kind of science and following that kind of logic and reason, it's sort of like walking into the Home Depot and feeling like you can build a house, or going to Williams-Sonoma and feeling like you can cook a 12-course dinner. So thank you for that. And I think the segue there, before I begin, you make an incredible point. The funding needs to go to research, to the things that don't yet have markers, cures, vaccines, and I am a huge, huge supporter of that. And like Scott said, hunger, food insecurity, and the problem of food waste is the most preventable problem we'll have in our lifetime, at least mine. It's not a blind disease. It's not something where we don't know what's happening. It's about distribution and better mobilization. So I think I've given, hopefully, a long enough intro that I can take 2 seconds to try and figure this out, because like I said, I am not a scientist in any way or technologically sound. Thank you so much. So after having done all that, it is always a question of whether or not I'll remember to actually follow the PowerPoint. So I'm giving that to you as a disclaimer. This is an incredible day. This is an incredible conference, and I want to thank everyone for being here. I want to thank the Chancellor, John, Scott, and all of you and the other presenters for including us here. John Barrows made the point that innovation doesn't necessarily have to be anything new. It doesn't necessarily have to be new business. And the idea behind food rescue and food recovery, it's not new. We're not doing anything brand new. We're not creating more. There's no additional production. It's about connecting existing community resources, keeping costs down all throughout the food system, which inevitably connects people, economics, social service from top to bottom. So this really is about connecting existing community resources. A few months ago, I was at another conference in Virginia, presenting on topics just like this. For me, obviously, food rescue, but the idea was innovation, new ideas, creation. And the theme of the conference was the prefix re, R-E. So there were people talking about redesign, architects, city planners, revitalization of neighborhoods, of policy, from top to bottom, all different kinds of words that started with re. Obviously, rescue starts with re. Recovery is re. But for me, the title there was reframe, because I think that food needs a reframe. I think it needs a reframe in this country. I think it needs a reframe in the world. And along with that, so does charity and philanthropy. We have to start looking at food differently. And that is why I'm here. It is not my background. I am not a scientist. I'm not a business person. Because of Lovin Spoonfuls and things like this, I've spent more time on college campuses presenting and being a part of these things than I think I ever did when I went to college, which is sort of incredible, and there's so much to learn, and it really is a privilege to be able to do this. Since Lovin Spoonfuls started, the idea has always been truly to reframe. And that's still the idea, but it continually spurs new ones. I've presented a number of times in the last 5 years about food rescue, but there's a marked difference in the last few years. At the very beginning, I would talk about food rescue, food recovery, and I would always get the same two questions. And the first one was always, so you're a dumpster diver, so you're a freegan. And the second one was, did I believe in magic? Nod to the band. People were always disappointed to find out that we are not a cover band of the Lovin Spoonful. I try and reassure everybody that it is better for everyone that I don't sing. Truly, it's better for everybody. And that no, I'm not a dumpster diver. I'm also not a bleeding heart that just needed a new idea for charity, that just needed a new idea to do that. This is something that was going unaddressed in our food system. And I was working in retail at the time, so truly, not a background in this. But the simple idea was, what happens to all that wasted food? And I think most of us at one point or another, we've all had that thought, whether it's at the table at a restaurant, at home, at the supermarket, now and really recently, we really start hearing more and more about the food system. Food itself. Food is sort of becoming its own celebrity right now, right? It's having its moment. It has networks dedicated to it, glossy magazines. Food stores are sort of the new department stores. Everything about food is beautiful, well-presented, and completely consumer-driven. So what that does is it creates an incredible amount of production. And that's just the way production works, and there's nothing really wrong with that. However, we are at the point where we need to do something on the other end of that production. To that point, in this country, well, I guess I'll start with the slides here so I don't forget. I'm already forgetting. There we go. So, did you know, in the United States, over 40% of the food that we produce is going to waste. That's over 100 billion pounds of food. In the meantime, almost 50 million Americans are now classified as food insecure. And the difference, right, now we hear about food insecurity versus hunger so much, and the difference is that food insecurity is really defined as not knowing where your next meal is coming from. The face of hunger has changed, the look of hunger has changed, the demographics of hunger have changed. Food insecure folks are people with jobs, cars, one kid in private school, but they have to make choices about what they're going to pay that month. Do I put gas in the car? Do I go to the grocery store? Or do I go looking for a job? Those are the kinds of things that now affect us as an entire population, as an entire demographic. Conversely, in the country, we produce 430 billion pounds of food each year. 430 billion pounds of food. That can feed almost 400 million people. So right there, there's a discrepancy, and it's often missing from the conversation. That 40% of food, if you were to fill the Rose Bowl every day, it's almost a 100,000-seat arena. If you were to fill the Rose Bowl every day and set it on fire, that's the rate that we waste food. And I'm not talking about plate waste. I'm talking about whole raw product, food that can be upcycled, produce, proteins, whole grains, and dairy. I get chills still every time I see that. It's a massive amount of food in flames every day. Food has become the largest source of solid waste in our waste stream, the single largest component. Across the country, it's about 14% of our solid waste stream. In Massachusetts, put now between 20 and 25%. That is a lot of food in the waste stream. Most of you may have read in the last few weeks or so, Massachusetts has, talk about innovation, one of the first states to really start talking about a commercial food waste ban. So people are thinking about this, right? That's the other difference from a few years ago. Food is a big part of the conversation, and it's a topic that people are thinking about, they want to know more about. The commercial food waste ban in Massachusetts means that it's about 1,700 businesses across the state that are going to be affected. And anyone who is tossing a ton or more of organic waste a week now has to divert it from the waste stream. It's an incredible, incredible movement. We've been working with the DEP, we've been working with the EPA, Mass Recycles to help roll this out. We're so excited. And this truly points to the resources that Massachusetts has to really become a leader in what we do. Originally, in the first iteration of this, it was all for anaerobic digestion. Anybody heard of anaerobic digestion? Stop and Shop building the huge anaerobic digesters. It's incredible, turning organic waste into clean energy. We're missing a couple of steps, right? So much of this food, whole, raw product, we really want to go and redesign and reframe the food waste pyramid, if you will. So the first is always going to be source reduction. The second, let's not miss the opportunity to feed people. Let's not throw things into compost or to anaerobic digestion that we can upcycle into the social service stream. If you ask any of the nonprofits in town, whether it's Pine Street, Rosie's, any of the really small soup kitchens, some of their biggest challenges include sourcing food. It's their most expensive challenge that they have. And sourcing healthy food, most of the time out of their budget. So it's something to keep in mind when we're talking about efficiency. Let's make sure we can hit all the points that we need to really do a better job by folks who depend on that social service stream, because that net is wide and it's growing. The consequences of food in the landfill. Food that goes to waste each year costs us 25% of our fresh water use to produce that food that's being burned. It also takes 300 million barrels of oil to produce that food that's burned. Last I checked as a globe, we're in an oil crisis, we're in a water crisis. We need to conserve and protect the planet, and it is the most preventable thing to do. And that's not to mention the food that's rotting in landfill, burning off 113 million tons of CO2 emissions, not to mention the methane. Methane, 25 times more harmful than CO2. It costs $1 billion in taxpayer money to incinerate this food, and the value of that food is about $165 billion that we're tossing in the trash. Tossing it in the trash. As John said, under 700,000 people classified as food insecure in Boston. We have the opportunity to decide, not only in Boston, but in Massachusetts, that we can become a food secure community. We do it with better mobilization, and we do it with the connection of resources. The health consequences of continuing to waste food rather than upcycle it into the service stream. Right now, the traditional way that we feed people through food banks, food pantries, canned, non-perishable, shelf-stable food. Salt, sugar, fat. We have an entire generation of folks who are growing up by no choice of theirs, but to have to access any kind of help or assistance they can find. They're growing up with diabetes, with obesity, juvenile obesity, heart disease. It's costing the state and the country exorbitant amounts of money in urgent care health costs. 5 years later, just about, Lovin Spoonfuls rescued almost 2 million pounds of fresh, healthy food. We've done it with direct distribution. We started out with one car, which was mine. And now we've gone, and this is a model that can be replicated and scaled to any geographical area. We actually just put a pound count ticker on our homepage, so folks follow along with us through Twitter. We're now, I think we're at 1.8 And so the countdown as we get to 2 is an incredible milestone for us. We feed about 25,000 people a week through a model of direct distribution. We're picking up food from grocery stores, huge supermarkets, really large-scale retail, farms, produce wholesalers, restaurants, bakeries. We use only temperature-controlled vehicles to get it from point A to point B. Our model works, like I said, with direct distributions. We've got just under 100 partners in our total partner umbrella, 50-plus donors, and just now under 50 nonprofit beneficiaries. Our largest client, for example, is Whole Foods. When Whole Foods took over the Johnny's Food Masters all throughout town, they started a rollout program. With any kind of production, again, there's going to be overrun. Doesn't matter if it's textiles, food, what have you. The idea now is to be responsible on the back end, right? If you think about recycling 30 years ago, nobody wanted the blue bins at the end of their driveway. Nobody wanted to take a few extra minutes and sort and separate. Now, it is mandated. It is part of our waste stream. It's absolutely part of our waste stream. And so the way it works is very simple. Again, we're not scientists. We're not reinventing the wheel. We're trying to create some efficiency in our waste stream. So we send our trucks out every day. We have full-time ServSafe certified drivers. We have all the licenses we would need to open a restaurant or operate a food truck, only for the purposes of making sure that we're able to handle food in a safe, regulated, effective way. We're working with only perishable, healthy foods. So fresh produce, lean proteins, whole grains, and dairy. We make sure that the morning is spent picking up this food. We have set schedules with our vendors. They know when we're going to show up. There's an element of customer service here. We want to make sure wherever we're going, we're not disrupting anybody's business, their bottom line, their customer experience. So, and they can feel good about doing that, right? It's reducing that vendor's carbon footprint. It's reducing their waste hauling fees. And they're getting a tax break from donating to us. We get it on the truck. We've, in the last 2 years, implemented a digital inventory system. So that means that we can track in real time in the office what we're picking up, where it's coming from, and it creates an accessible chain of command. If there are any recalls, if there's ever any concern about food, we can track where it came from, where it went, on what day. It also helps us keep a meaningful relationship with our partners so that it's not an arbitrary drop-off. There's an element of food rescue that's a little bit random, right? You never know exactly what you're gonna get, but during the season, you get an idea, and from week to week, you get an idea. You know, in the holiday months, you're gonna be getting a lot of turkey. You know, in March, you're gonna be getting a lot of corned beef, things like that. You know, in the summer with the farm hauls, you know what kind of root vegetables and pallets we're gonna be getting. And that means that we can create really meaningful relationships with our beneficiaries. Somebody like Pine Street is going to be really different from a really small domestic violence safe house that we work with. It depends on kitchen supplies, kitchen capability, cold storage, food that's already prepped versus whole raw product. There's a lot of logistics that go into this. And we do the best we can to make sure that we're getting food to where it needs to go, feeding men, women, children, and seniors. At the end, it's a triple bottom line solution. All of the consequences that come from wasting food, we can prevent by not wasting food. And really, truly, it is the most preventable problem that we have in our lifetime. And I'll leave you with this stat. 15% less waste could feed 25 million people. This is a relatively less expensive option than the billion-dollar hunger relief industry that's out there. And again, money needs to go to funding. It needs to go to research. It has to go places where it's really going to make some impact there. We can do this for less, and that's gonna benefit everybody. What I really want to say before I close, and I'll leave it here, I don't know if I'm able to stay for the entire day, but Mayor Menino is being presented with an award for innovation. When we were in Mass Challenge, he's been an incredible champion, not just of Lovin Spoonfuls, but of innovation in Boston. And it was by taking the approach that it's not necessarily about doing something new, it's about doing it differently. It's encouraging business to support that, to look at things a different way and to have a new perspective. So we look at food as a way to unite and connect communities and really believe that food is a right and not a privilege, and we can do it in Massachusetts. Thank you. Hey.
Thanks so much, Ashley. Question from Twitter, David Vera wants to know, is most of the waste that we're talking about from the big national chain restaurants like a Burger King or a Kentucky Fried Chicken, and he also wants to know about the liability issues that big chains like that might worry about, if there are any.
So I'll answer the second question first and the first question second. The liability issues, it's a corporate liability. It's not a legal liability. And I think that's been the big, big misnomer, which has prevented food rescue from really becoming sort of a thread in the fabric of social service. When Clinton was in office in '96, he passed the Good Samaritan Act, and there's a very specific provision that encourages food rescue, so long as it meets certain compliance bullets. That has to do with safe handling, temperature control, all of that. So there are protections in place. A lot of states now have tandem legislation in place as well.
But what does that mean that it's corporate liability?
So, for example, I'm from Boston. I am Boston born and bred. I love this state. I love this town. Sometimes we tend to do things maybe the same way for a long time without a lot of change, right? So if you have an institution in Boston that says, we don't do it that way, we never have, we don't make room, it's policy. That's not a legal policy. That's not prohibitive by law. That's saying we don't do it here for whatever reason. The idea is to change mind. But there is no legal liability, provided that all of those provisions are met.
Okay, and the first part about chains?
And the first part, so chains contribute to it. However, if we're looking at large shelf retail, which are the larger amounts of food and sort of the larger pallets of food, and then food that can't be taken from the fields. So food that's plowed under, that's not harvested, that's sort of left to turn it into its own compost.
Okay, and I'm curious about if you have an idea for sort of what is the next stage of Lovin Spoonfuls look like in terms of, you said distribution is part of the problem. You're working with a lot of, a lot of food pantries and organizations like Pine Street. I was in San Francisco last week, and there are a zillion startups that have this idea of like, let's have regular people driving around the city, and when you click a button on your app, your dinner will get delivered to your house in 15 minutes, right? That's sort of where the startup world is going, and I'm wondering if you have a vision of sort of what does a more distributed Lovin Spoonfuls look like, so you don't necessarily need to rely on those nodes of I go and stand in line, at a soup kitchen to get fed.
Right. So I think for us, we really are the ferry. And what we didn't address today, we really need to be able to talk about food and politics in the same conversation, food and policy. We have to be able to talk about living wage. We have to talk about expanding staff. We have to be able to talk about hunger has only become the epidemic that it is now in the last 30 or so years. So we have to be able to have that conversation sort of in tandem. In terms of the next iteration of Lovin Spoonfuls, first is the four corners of the Commonwealth. It's not quite 5 years yet. We're just outside the 128 belt. Ideally, down the road, this is something that needs to move away from nonprofit, right? Nonprofit can't shoulder social service the way it does right now. So what I want to see happen, and this could be 10 years, I don't know. What I want to see happen is we become part of the waste stream, that this is viewed as waste management. Food rescue is not an urgent response. It's something that really says this is what we can do. It's responsibility on our part. In terms of the thousands of apps that are being developed right now and food accessibility and all of that, I think in a few years we will find the ones that have staying power, which are going to be easy. But again, it's going to depend on the political climate and what people can access and how.
All right, great.
Cool, thanks.
Thanks so much,
Good to see you
Ashley.
again.